right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos, and tonight we have a very special stream for you guys, sponsored by one of our good brothers here in the community. Shout out to Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring tonight's stream, in which, again, I've titled it Socially Bankrupt, the Collapse of Community in America. But what we're going to be diving into is this book right here, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community by sociologist Robert Putnam. And so I didn't know what exactly I was getting into when Jeremy messaged me. He purchased tonight's stream and said, hey, I'm reading this book called Bowling Alone. I thought it's really interesting and you should dive into it. Maybe you can do a stream. Again, he went ahead and sponsored a stream. Maybe you can do one of the chapters, or you can find a theme within this book, but it's really interesting. And so I said, okay. And obviously, looking at the density of this book, I was sort of dreading it. Oh my gosh, I got to dive into this text. I got so much work to do. And then I actually dove into it. And I have to say, I do absolutely recommend this book to everyone out there. And let me just give you a quick synopsis on what this book is about and what we're going to be diving into tonight. I did not just decide to do a single chapter. No, I did my homework and went through the majority of this book. Now, I can't say I read every single page, but I certainly have a firm grasp on the topic. And so, sociologist Robert Putnam, again, it's kind of deceiving. Bowling alone. Well, what the heck is bowling alone? What are they talking about? Well, sociologist Robert Putnam did a lot of work regarding what's called social capital. Social capital, and obviously you're probably familiar with concepts like economic capital. That's the amount of money, again, one could put towards productivity, put towards work. There's a sociological term that got developed probably about 40 years ago in regards to human capital. That's about education, right? The idea that human capital or an individual could be more productive when investing in, say, their education or formal forms of training. And so those formal forms of training, that is capital. One can attain that education, that sort of training, whether it could be welding. Well, now you have a higher elevated sense of human capital. You can do more things. There's physical capital, like if you're a welder, actually having tools to weld. Those are a sort of physical capital in which you can do more work, just like if you have a hammer or a screwdriver. Well, there's another idea in regards to social capital, and that is that our relationships, the social networks we're involved in, actually are incredibly important and do in fact make us more productive. And that's what then this book is getting at, is Robert Putnam then tries to sort of triangulate ways in which he can use statistical data. So this book, and what you're going to see is we have tons and tons of graphs to look at. Again, I just open it up just right here. You see there's graph. This book is filled with graphs. And this is one of the things I do appreciate about this text is it's an incredible example of good social science work. So, the social sciences, I am myself a scholar in the liberal arts. I would say a lot of the social sciences out there, or what goes by as social scholarship or social science scholarship, kind of weak. But this book, again, published, I believe, in 1999, is an incredible source of showing somebody really putting in the legwork in regards to acquiring data, statistics, and a lot of different ways to sort of measure the decline in social capital, the ways in which we're involved in our communities on a personal level, the building of relationships themselves. And so social capital, like economic capital, like human capital, like physical capital, literally allows us to be more productive. We'll find multiple instances of this being true. One, for example, they did one study looking at children, boys. They chose a boy with the exact same variables, right? So same ethnicity, same age, same income bracket, same, race of parents, grandparents. The only real variable, at least for these sort of statistical data was one was in a community in which was highly involved. It had high social capital. People knew each other's names. The neighbors knew each other. And so when it came to PTA meetings, political activism, the Lions Club, whatever, lot more activity. And children that came from places with high social capital had better reading ability, had got jobs quicker, became more successful. And the child who, according to all measurements, was on the exact same playing field as the other child who did not come from a community that had high social capital, strong social relationships, intricate social networks, was slower and scored less on a variety of different things. So again, showing that social capital is a real thing. And in fact, as Robert Putnam speaks, you can find some of his lectures. He's still alive. You can find some lectures of him talking about this topic. In that social capital, there is an economist from the University of Chicago who actually did a study and showed that your Rolodex, the people that you know, is more valuable than the degree that you acquire. And this is one of the things that differentiates then those who actually go to Ivy League schools or these sort of higher echelon universities. It's not that their degrees are necessarily better than a degree at maybe a general public school or a state school or a smaller college. As the economist from the University of Chicago showed, the real value is in the Rolodex. It's in the social relationships, which then allows one to get better jobs, knows more people, makes more money, and so on and so forth. And so it really is your network. Yes, exactly. ABK says network equals net worth. And that is exactly what Robert Putnam would also argue. And so this book then, what it describes is from the 1950s in America, there has been a precipitous decline in all social involvement. So I'm talking about parents going to PTA meetings, local politics, electing your mayor. It could be, any sort of belonging to a group organization in which you have to meet in person, okay, has been on a precipitous decline. And this then has tons of ramifications to our culture. And so what's so interesting is despite this book going from 1950 to like 1998, 1999, it is only more true today than when Robert Putnam actually wrote this book. And so I couldn't recommend this book more. It is a dense read, but if this is a topic, again, once we get through, if this is a topic you'd like to learn a little bit more details about, I do recommend this book. And I do thank, again, our good brother Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring this stream and getting me to read this book, because I probably would have never read it any other way. So social capital allows the same person, as I said, to be more productive based on the relationships that they have. Meanwhile, as he shows, generation after generation, especially from what's called the greatest generation, the World War II generation, since then, every generation has become less and less and less socially involved. This creates more and more and more social isolation. And what's interesting is, though he tracks all forms of like major group organization, they're all on the decline. The only ones that are on the incline, the only ones that have increased in membership, are organizations that don't require in-person meetings, but only require a check. And this is another fascinating, it's a perspective change among Americans themselves. As he shows, political donations, like belonging to like the AARP, which is a group of people after the age of 50 in America. I think you have to write like a small little check. You get your AARP card and you get discounts on stuff like that. So memberships to groups where you don't have to do anything besides send a check in, those are on the increase. And that is how then people belong to groups, belong to organizations, not in-person activity. And so one of the things that got him really thinking about this is he was looking at what determines better governed places than other governed places. And he was looking at a few communities in Italy and noticed that, some people say, well, it's about wealth, right? More wealthier communities, less crime, more opportunities, all this different stuff. Well, that wasn't the case. Some of the most wealthiest places, again, it can be in America, around the world, not always the best governed, not always exactly what the people want that live there. But what he found was one of the biggest indicators as if a place was well governed was how many of the neighbors you knew their name, how close the community itself was to each other. And that communities that were very close in social capital, in their social networks, in their social relationships, had dramatically less crime. Obviously, if you know Bob and Julie across the street, you're not going to go rob Bob and Julie because you're friends with Bob and Julie. But in places in which people had less and less social capital, in places in which people did not know the names of their neighbors, crime went up, poverty went up, illness went up. That was one of the fascinating things. One of the most interesting things he showed is one of the best ways to live longer was to belong to more organizations, to have more communal involvement. And the more communal involvement we have, in a way, it's like we're becoming more responsible for other people. And that's going to drive us to live longer. They say, animals help their owners live longer, which is a fact. And in a way, that's like a very small form of social involvement, right? Oh, I have a cat, I have a dog, and it's going to help me live longer in my 80s. Well, the best thing you can do is actually belong to a community. Belong to groups. And that's where he found one of the best indicators of social involvement was people who went to church. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But people who went to church, who belonged to a religious organization, were way more likely to write letters, were way more likely to so Hallmark, for example, the card maker, knows this as a fact, that people who are religious, that people specifically who go to church, so Christians, buy way more cards. Hallmark, again, the card maker, buy way more cards because they want to send things, condolences, congratulations, sympathies for somebody in the hospital, because of the church itself is a major hub of our social communities and our social networks. And in fact, as he showed, all the organizations and philanthropic organizations in America, about half of all the organizations are religiously based. And so in conjunction with this, as God has dwindled and become less important in our society, our involvement in our society has as well. And so just like he showed with politics, communities that had high social capital, that had high social involvement in their social networks, had less crime, and there's less political corruption because the people were there to hold the politicians accountable. And so now we're run by a man with dementia, Joe Biden, right? We know that in America, our political system is absolutely corrupt. They just stole another election here in 2022. It's all fake. The whole thing's fake. Politics is fake. It's a joke. We're run by tyrants. And why is this allowed to even exist? It's because we've become more isolated. We become more involved or less involved with the community itself. And there's a whole list of potential causes here. But I'll just mention one here quickly that I think is the most interesting. We'll reflect on this later. I'm going to come back to this topic. But one of the things that he points as he thinks is one of the catalysts for this isolation process is the fact that technology has contributed to our leisure time becoming more of an individual experience because it can select for our personal preferences. And this is really interesting. Now, I'm going to come back to this, but again, the idea that technology allows me to select the music I want to listen to, the movies I want to listen to, I can play the games I want to play, that it sort of puts me in a cocoon effect in which I'm more and more and more concerned about what my own personal preferences are and the experience of my preference. Because he argues that if we look at the way communities interacted at the beginning of the 20th century, one of the things that they did is that leisure time was something we did collectively. We would go to the theater collectively. When we were off work, we would go in groups of people. So even when we wanted to relax, when we wanted to have leisure time, we did it with other people that we cared about. It was a communal thing. And so technology is allowing us to have leisure time. You can think of Netflix and chill, is actually an isolating effect in which now we just do the things we have to do, and then we go back and we get in our comfy clothes and we allow the technology to inundate us in our own sort of own preferential cocoons. Now that, again, we have multiple culprits here, right? So this isn't like a single cause or a single variable has led to this collapse in social capital and community here in America. It's multiple things. But I think that technology, and that it sort of works on offering us our personal preferences, it was a subtlety that I was not aware of or was expecting, but something that I'm definitely going to take away from this reading. Now, as I said, what is the worth of your Rolodex? As we said, your network is your net worth, that it's worth more than your degree. Social networks have value even for those not directly involved. One of the other things that we'll get into here that has led to the collapse of social communities and social networks in America was also women going into the workforce. Now, Putnam himself says this is probably about 20% of the problem here. But say again, at the early 20th century and even in the 1950s, because basically what he showed is from 1945 to 1965, it was the most civically involved point in American history. At no point were more people involved in groups and their PTA meetings and their local communities, creating new groups, men always meeting together to do similar activities. And that's why he titled the book Bowling Alone. Because interestingly, one of the largest owners of bowling alleys reached out to him and said, hey, we're losing money here over at the bowling alleys. Can you tell us what's going on? We need people to be in bowling leagues. And bowling, interestingly, as he highlights, is a unique aspect of American culture and has always been a very prominent part of American social life. And so he shows, despite from the 1950s into the 80s and 90s, the amount of people who bowl going up 20%, bowling leagues have dropped over 40%. So people are preferring to bowl alone than bowl in groups. And so he talks about how, corporations, companies would have bowling leagues. Men would have bowling leagues. Even women who weren't great at bowling, they would go out with their girlfriends. They'd be in a bowling league. They would do things together. And that people who own bowling alleys, they make money off the beer. They make money off the food. And so they make the money off the bowling leagues. But when people just go there to bowl alone, they eat less food, they drink less alcohol, they stay for shorter periods of time. And so despite bowling, the amount of people bowling in America continually going up, the amount of bowling leagues and communal involvement has precipitously gone down. So, networks are valuable for people who aren't even directly involved. And so this would be instances of, say, before the women really entered into the workforce, there would be a stay-at-home mother. And this might be true for many of you guys that had a stay-at-home mother, that was fortunate enough to have a mother that involved. Is one of the things he points out is that while men went and worked, women were stay-at-home mothers, they tend to always be more involved in the children's education, going to the PTA meetings, knowing what the teachers were teaching in school. In fact, probably being friends with the teachers in the local community. And so women, yes, they didn't have a 9-to-5 job, but one of the functions that they had, what was intrinsic to society, is that they were pillars of social capital. They were there to make sure that that relationships stayed strong. And again, it wasn't that they were conscientious of this, it's that women are more social creatures. And so when they didn't have to go work from a 9-to-5, they were involved with their children and they were doing things during the day, belonging to groups, hanging out with other women that increased social capital. And so that was beneficial even to their husbands who weren't there, right? A man who is working, right? Even if his wife is going and having picnics with other families, meeting other wives, Well, then they get together and now they have dinner with the wife and her husband. And now the husband, who wasn't there because he was working a 9 to 5, the social capital gained by his wife belonging to groups. Now they hang out with more married couples, yada, yada. And so that could lead to job opportunities. That could lead to deeper friendships. That could lead to them now creating a golf league or a group that goes golfing, all this type of stuff. So the women were a fixture and a sort of pillar or glue in regard to this social capital. But again, as they entered the workforce from the mid 1960s, it's been a straight downward decline in regards to people belonging to groups. And so social capital networks are intrinsically tied to the concept of reciprocity. This is another thing that he highlighted in the book, is that these social networks aren't built upon this idea of a one-to-one exchange. I do something for you and you do something immediately for me, like a barter or a transaction. You purchase a good, you give the amount of money for that good. It's an immediate transaction. You don't hang out with people that you do these sort of impersonal transactions with. You don't hang out with the cashiers or the waiters at the restaurant. That within social capital, what is really happening, it's building relationships with people where you will do something for somebody, but you're not expecting something back immediately. There's a reciprocity that is like, we build trust with each other, and if I need you in the future, you'll help me. You don't need to pay me now. I don't want anything from you. I'll help you do what you need to do. And in the future, if I need something, I'll reach out to you and you'll help me. This was the basic concept that it crossed, doesn't matter what language group, what nation you come from. This is the undergirding of the social networks, of the social communities, of social capital itself. And so you can easily see, well, the idea of reciprocity necessitates that I'm going to do something for somebody that I may not benefit from. It's a sort of service. And as social capital declines, we are more and more concerned only with ourselves. Again, not only our personal preferences, but what we get out of something. Oh, well, I'll help you, but you got to give me money, or you got to do something immediately for me. You got to take me out to lunch afterwards. The idea that you have to do something to get people involved to do something else. It becomes a transaction. That's not a relationship. And it's the detriment and the death of these intricate relationships that we form with other people. This has precipitated to the culture that we live in itself. That is what necessitates a high trust society. Everybody wants to talk about the difference in racial, ethnic groups and how certain people come from high trust societies. Well, it's not specific to any one race or ethnicity, but what it is, it's the idea that you'll do something for somebody else without the demand or the expectation they have to do something for you immediately. The expectation is that now there's a relationship there, and if there was a time when you needed somebody, they would be there for you. And so the fact that we don't involve ourselves in community leads to the death of a high trust society. And so he has shown every single year since the 1950s has Americans said that society has become less trustworthy, has become more dangerous, that the country's moving in the wrong direction. And so that's fascinating. That's fascinating that people have been slowly picking up, whether they're conscious of it or not, that there's been a drop in the trust in our society. And that's related to the lack of our participation in our society. And the fact that, again, like I said, voting itself, we know the 2020 election was stolen. We know that 2022, give me a break, right? Fetterman, Pennsylvania, Arizona, give me a break, right? Give me a break. So we know that one of these civic opportunities that we would participate in was the political affairs, that voting, doing all this stuff. They've, in a way, they have created a sort of a malaise amongst Americans. They don't even participate in voting. And that was the thing. He showed that people bowled way more than they voted. And that bowling actually was a really interesting metric to show how Americans have sort of pulled themselves out of the community life itself. And so doing something for somebody without expecting something back, as he showed, is an incredibly strong and efficient variable when looking at community health. Community health. And now, again, that's what would differentiate, say a ghetto or a high crime, poverty-stricken area. There's going to be an incredibly low amount of reciprocity amongst the people that live there. And so because people are not doing things for the kindness of their hearts or for the purpose of building relationships with other people, crime goes up, distrust goes up, poverty goes up, drug addiction goes up, suicide goes up. Everything that we would associate with negativity, ironically, tends to go up when we pull ourselves out of the communities and our involvement with other people. And so community and organizational involvement, as I said, has continued to drop at a significant rate since the 1950s, 1945 through 65 being the greatest period in American civility on record. And so organizations that involve check writing, as I said, have ironically gone up. So one of the fascinating things is that if you looked at political donations in the 1950s and even the early 1960s, way lower than it is today, because the involvement there wasn't a concept that if I get involved, I have to give money. It was that I have to give my time. I go participate, I do something, I'm physically there. I don't need to give you money. I volunteer my time and my effort. And so he shows that really beginning in the 70s and 80s, there's been a switch in the American psyche and what it means to be involved or contribute to something. And that essentially somewhere in the 80s, it have made a transition that if I want to be involved or if I want to help something, I just write a check. And it's this impersonal exchange of energy, right? I mean, because both examples involve energy transference. If I go and I volunteer somebody to be there in person, I'm exchanging the energy, my own energy capital, for whatever group or organization I'm belonging to. And that's what money is. Money is also a form of energy transference. You do labor, you get the exchange and the equal amount of money you're supposed to, right? And so there's been a flip in the American psyche that if I want to help something or organization, I just give money. And this leads to a sort of impersonal idea of how I interact with the world, which we'll get back to. Again, I have a section here I want to get into in regards to satanic isolation, but gets back to the idea that I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about organizations that involve check writing and money, that it's an impersonal, it's not on a one-to-one. You can't see the face of somebody, right? Like you can if you belong to an organization when you just write a check. But we've talked about social justice, saving Earth, saving, I love people, I love humanity. And ironically, as he shows too, the least tolerable people, the people have the least amount of tolerance are the people who participate the least in civil relationships, social relationships, and engage in social capital, which I'm going to connect that here in a second. But, so the people who engage in social capital, again, which he said that going to church was the number one marker of somebody who'd be involved in a community. People who go to church, turns out, are way more tolerable of people they disagree with or have different opinions with than people who don't involve themselves, whether it be church or anything else. So it's the exact opposite, right? What's the narrative of our society? Christians are bigots. Christians are closed-minded. Christians are dumb. And Christians only care about themselves, and Christians hate the gays, and they hate the LGBT. Turns out it's the exact opposite. It's the people who are more involved on personal relationships and community building are actually way more tolerable of people that they totally disagree with. Meanwhile, people who don't involve themselves in society actually become less and less and less tolerable. And I'm going to come back to this here in a second. So as I said, church attendance, he showed, was the greatest indicator of who gets involved in America, with half of all philanthropy and organizations being religiously Christian-based in America. And that involvement greatly decreases chance of death and health issues, ill health. So that is another one. That was one of the things that he thought was the most surprising statistical data that he acquired from his research, was that people who belonged to organizations and groups and participated in face-to-face interactions with other people and had relationships lived longer and actually were, in fact, healthier, right? Disease themselves, they weren't, prescribed or diagnosed with something. That one they showed is that people who were more lonely or more socially isolated, less involved, died quicker by a substantial number. It wasn't even close. It wasn't like, it's kind of close. No, a substantial number. The people who were socially isolated died quicker. And so this gets to my last point here in regards to the opening monologue, and that is satanic isolation. Now, obviously, this is a sociological book filled with statistical data and graphs. This is not a religious text. This is not a theological text. But as Orthodox Christians and Christians generally speaking, I think there's a lot of theological jewels we can glean from this data. And I framed this last part, satanic isolation. What I think makes a lot of sense, that in fact, people who go to church are way more involved and in fact way more tolerant of other people, is because the whole basis, not just of religion generally speaking, but I'm just going to speak to Christianity here specifically, is the idea that we commune with a personal God on a personal level. Prayer is part of a personal theology. We've got into the concept of personhood, not going to get into that tonight, but it's a personal relationship in which we're striving for communion with God, which forces us to go to the church, which we commune then with other people, the body of Christ, because we are the body of Christ. The people who belong to the church are the body of Christ, and the body of Christ participates in the Eucharist, which again is the body and blood of Christ. And we do that because you are what you eat. And so because we are what we eat, we are the body of Christ, but then we're communing with the body of Christ in heaven. And so the whole point of our religion is communion, community, communication, the logos, the word, communication. Words right now, me facilitating and using language is part of a communal building process, right? I don't communicate to animals like I'm communicating to other persons, other people. But even right now, look at how abstract this is. I'm looking at a camera with a green dot next to it to know that it's live and I'm recording right now. This is not a face-to-face interaction. And we're going to get into technology and how, again, it's distorted our social relationships, and that social involvement, especially in the 21st century, is moving our social community building online. And this is why church and going to church, belonging to a parish, is really the last frontier of true human relationships, built on the principle of reciprocity. You will do something for somebody else without the intent or the obligation to get something back, right? And so salvation, as I said, we do it as a collective. We are saved as a collective. We are not saved as individuals. Our entire theology is yet personal and individual, and yet at the same time collective and community oriented. And so this is why then, as I've talked about, orthodoxy is emphatic about one-to-one relationships. The only way you can express love or kindness or mercy or compassion to somebody, things that again lead to community building, things that lead to authentic relationships with other people, they can only be done on a one-to-one level. They can only be done with a person who also has human nature. I can't love a concept. I can't love an abstract idea. I can't fight for social justice. I can only do these things for other people. And so our entire theology, the way in which we engage with the uncreated energies of God, is on a one-to-one level with us, with God himself, but also the way that we then act in the world is on a one-to-one level. And really, that's how God uses us. You see, God uses people right now in your life. Be conscientious of who is in your life and who's coming in and out, because they're all providence. It's all providence. Your family, your friends, it's all providence. It's all ultimately God's will. And God works through all of us, right? As we follow Christ and we become little Christ, Christians in the true sense, God is working through us in our relationships and in the world and through our activities, but that's also true for other people. And so God works through people. But if people aren't engaging with people, you can see why God would slowly fall further and further and further out of the equation. And this is a sort of satanic isolation then. That isolation is death. He shows, significant health declines with people who are socially isolated. They literally are going to die quicker, and they literally are going to have health problems. And so isolation is death. Sin is a way in which we isolate ourselves from God, right? And so isolation is a process. It's a thing within our worldview as Christians, which we want to avoid. We don't want to be isolated. And the ultimate entity that is isolated would be Satan himself. Because Satan himself, being so prideful, wanting to be worshiped as God, is the most isolated being, because there's no service. There's no love, no compassion, no mercy, no understanding for somebody else. It's always about self. And you can see then why technology playing on our personal preferences in a way is making us all more and more and more like Satan, like Lucifer, like the evil one, because we're only concerned with ourselves. We've talked about how Gnosticism and magic and these various spiritual worldviews lead to sort of self-worship, but really all this is sort of necessitated or obvious outcomes due to the decline of our social capital and our involvement within society itself. And so it is a death process, a spiritual death process, a physical death process. And look at 2020 and look at the world since then. It's only created more and more and more social isolation. And now they want to say, oh no, you'll have your community through the metaverse. You can just put on your VR headset, and then that's how you'll experience your friends. That's how you'll go see the mountain. That's the newest thing I saw of Zuckerberg. Oh no, it's really good because you can go experience the Rocky Mountains with your VR headset. How about you just go to the Rocky Mountains? How about we do, traveling's really bad for the environment. That's why I have a private plane. So isolation literally is death. There is no more isolated entity that is created by God than Satan, than Lucifer, than the evil one himself. And that sin, our engagement in sin, again, is another process in which we begin to isolate ourselves from God. That's why we have to repent, so that we can recommune, we can reconnect, we can reunify ourselves with God's community. We can communicate back to the group. So isolation leads, in my argument, to the NPC. Right? The non-playable character, the person who's losing the image of God, because the image of God, God himself, is why we can participate in love, why we can participate in truth and logic and mercy and compassion, is because we're made in the image of God. And if we are continually isolating ourselves from other people, we're going to lose the ability to utilize the image of God in us. And if we're engaging in sin, and if we're engaging in a bunch of forms of self-pleasure, we're not only killing ourselves spiritually, but we're isolating ourselves both spiritually and probably literally. Because if I'm only concerned with my pleasure, how am I going to truly love somebody? How am I truly going to take care of somebody? How am I truly going to hold somebody higher than myself so that I can serve them? Right? The true concept of an orthodox marriage is a martyrdom to one's own will and the sole purpose of serving the other person. But we look at then the divorce rates, which is another thing that has dramatically inclined as, again, our social and group activity has declined. Why is it that more and more people are getting divorced? Why is it that more and more people are choosing to have kids and not even get married? Right? This is part of this isolation process, and I think isolation in a way forms the NPC, the non-playable character. Because as they become more and more isolated, not just from God, but from other people, what do they refer? They refer back to the matrix, the system, the mass media. This is the ways in which they inform themselves. This is the ways in which they gain their own identity, right? And so it's so interesting that the satanic isolation, us becoming more isolated from other people and our own prideful pursuit of our own pleasure, that's what they're telling women, right? As I said, one of the major factors was women entering the workforce. And yet now they're getting the women to be so prideful about the moment. Oh, get your career, girl, and then only pursue your pleasure. Don't have children. Just get a cat and then have sex with as many men as you can. Try them all out. All types of guys. Have as many sexual partners as you want. That is destroying spiritually that person. It's isolating them further and further and further. And they naturally are going to become the NPC. They're naturally going to be the person that's voting for everything that is ultimately death. And it goes both right and left, right? An NPC is not a Democrat or a Republican. They're both, right? But to equate the basic presuppositions of both, that's just stupid, right? Obviously, there's a difference in presuppositions, or at least somewhat in the worldviews, but NPCs can be both. I'm not trying to make a political argument there. But again, as I said, if people are becoming more isolated because they're only pursuing their own pride and pleasure, they then aren't having the opportunity to experience other people as conduits of God to inform themselves. And so I thought it's so interesting. I started, after, again, reading this book, I started thinking about tech companies. And I saw a recent video of a man who claims to be a woman, who got fired from Twitter. So Elon Musk obviously recently took over Twitter, and he fired a man who claimed to be a woman, a transgender chick, I guess, or transitioned to a girl. He didn't even look very well, and sounded just like a man. Anywho, this dude started going on about how great Twitter was as a work environment, and how he's really concerned with Elon Musk and he's destroying the culture and all this stuff. But I started thinking about, again, community building, social capital. If you were to hear somebody yammer on about team building, you gotta help and belong with the team. You gotta help with the collective. This rhetoric almost entirely comes from leftist-oriented people. And I began to think about tech companies and how they try to have, engagements, and they play sports, and they have cafeterias, and this is all for team building. This is so we can have a social environment, and they don't do cubicles, right? It's just an open work floor. And at the same time, these tech companies are pursuing marginalized people who would perceive themselves as more isolated from the world. And then they belong to communities online. So if I'm a transgender youth or whatever, I may not know a lot of people in my area. And so I then am physically isolated, but then online I have a social network of like-minded people. And so then we see these tech companies prefer marginalized people, black lesbians, transgenders, whatever your particular identifier is. You're more likely to get hired than me as a white male, a white heterosexual male, right? Going to have a little bit of a tougher time working for a tech company. And so in a way, we see the tech company and the perniciousness of technology itself build its sort of body of workers based on the marginalized, the isolated people, and giving them a sort of false form of community. Because as I said, community cannot be transactional. And if your community and the people you belong to as your coworkers at Twitter, that is a transactional communal exchange. You are not there for the reciprocity and the care of other people. You're there to get a paycheck. And then because everybody has the same political ideas, you guys are friends and you all are there together at the same time to get the same paychecks. That's not real community building. And yet, ironically, if we looked in our society or Google, look at the ads, Apple, Google, Facebook, Metaverse, it's all about community. It's all about collective. And yet what they're doing is isolating us further and further and further. And so I want to say then that no service, no martyrdom, no salvation in living for yourself. But that's exactly what the system wants, right? They want you to get the jibby jab to save the masses, right? It's the pandemic of the unstabbed. Yet as even Washington Post came out, it's the majority of people dying from the coof are all jabbed, and the more jabs you get, the quicker you're gonna die. That is a fact. We know it. The system is trying to kill you. It's the satanic isolation, the NPC, the person who's programmed by the matrix itself because it doesn't have the connectivity with other people built, maintaining the image of God in themselves to allow God to communicate and maintain that image of service, of gratitude, of reciprocity with other people. And really, then that's the whole point of Christ. Christ is the ultimate form of service. Christ is the ultimate martyr. Christ is salvation. And so one person, Jesus Christ, both God and man, the God-man, symbolizes the ways in which we actually connect with other people. It's through service. And service eventually may lead to you sacrificing yourself, which is martyrdom. And you can see how that is salvation. And yet this whole concept has been distorted in a way. And so the people taking the jibby jab, they think they're doing the exact thing, right? They think they're doing a service and that they're going to martyr themselves. They didn't expect that they're going to die. Of course, that's what's happening. But they're going to go get the jibby jab so that they don't harm anybody and that they're going to be saved by doing that. And of course, they're killing themselves. And so the satanic isolation is a point in which I think we should keep in mind as we will now go through some of this book and look at many of the causes and reasons and some of his statistical data for the things at hand. So guys, smash that like. Hope everybody's going to be enjoying tonight's stream. We got a lot to dive into. Thank you all for being here. I want to first and foremost thank everybody who has gone to the website and signed up as a website member. If you enjoy the type of content that I make here and what we're doing with Church of the Eternal Logos, the best way to support my work is to become a website member. And there's 3 different memberships over at the website. There is the basic membership, the Logo subscription, which gives you access to an exclusive video library. That then you can get in the next tier membership is the Logos Fitness membership, which will give you access to that exclusive video library, as well as a video library related to fitness videos, as well as a fitness meeting we do the first Tuesday of every month. The first Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we get into a Zoom call, which we just, again, wasn't the first Tuesday, but the Tuesday before Thanksgiving this past week. We went ahead and met with everybody who signed up. And it's a fitness accountability group and lifestyle group with all types of workouts, whatever you're into. And then there's the Logos Premium membership that gives you access to all of what was just mentioned, plus 2 private premium members groups, Zoom meetings, usually 2 hours long, Thursdays, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, twice a month. And so if you would like to belong to or participate in any of that, you can do so with the link that I posted there. If you would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. If you would like to sponsor a stream, you can do so with this link right here. Again, we need to give a major shout out to Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring today's stream and again, getting me to look into and read this book. So shout out to Jeremy Hosey. God bless you, brother. I actually met Jeremy. He's a fellow Hoosier here in Indiana. He actually doesn't live too far away from me. I went down to All Saints, which is an Orthodox church in Bloomington, Indiana. And lo and behold, Jeremy was there. We got to chit chat and hang out for a little bit. And so shout out to you, brother. God bless you. Jeremy Hosey, another great dude, fit dude, doing bodybuilding. I think he may be about to compete. So really cool guy in our community. Shout out to Jeremy. God bless you, bro. Thank you so much for sponsoring this stream and being patient with me diving into this thick book that you wanted me to do a stream on. So thank you very much, brother. I really appreciate you. And God bless you and your family. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. All right. So now, with that being said, let's get into a little bit more of today's stream. The first thing I want to show you guys, though, is a little bit of a breakdown on social community. So this is, I forget which year, I believe this was like early 2000s, so not too much later after the book that we're reading tonight or going over, Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. But what this does is it breaks down social capital by counties in America. And I just want you to notice something real interesting here, that the lighter, the top 20%, more social capital, right? Notice that the more rural places are, the more social capital, the more communally and socially involved people are. The denser the population, generally speaking, notice how the darker blue, the less social capital, the less social involvement, the less organizational involvement people engaged in. And so this is just a breakdown of every county in the United States. Wherever you find yourself, you can check out and see how you and your community fare in regards to social capital and social involvement. As we look right through here, the plains areas have actually the highest social capital of all places. So very interesting stuff. Just wanted to share this quick little graph with you guys. Again, figure 2 showing where social capital is its highest and its lowest in America. And as you probably expect, in the most rural places, the Midwest specifically has the highest social capital. And then it'd be the Midwest and the Mountain West. Rural places have the highest social capital in the United States, which makes sense. They're also the most conservative places. They probably have the highest percentage of people who still go to church. So again, consistent with everything that we're going to lay out here with Robert Putnam's research. So before we start diving into this book, I do want to go over some of the potential causes for this significant decline in social organization within the United States. As I said, the first one, and we're going to go through a whole host of things that have aided in this process. The number one, though, and again, no, let me start over. The first one I'm going to highlight, not that it's number one or more significant than other ones. I personally think the technology one's probably the most significant. But the first one I want to mention is the one I already mentioned, and that is women entering the workforce. As I highlighted there in the opening monologue, is that traditionally women were responsible and produced a ton of social capital, right? Even if I'm a man and I go to work 9 to 5 and I'm not there, my wife going to PTA meetings, knowing the teachers that my children have in school, going out to lunch with the other women, she is building social capital so that when I come home from work, maybe we're going out to dinner with the Robinsons, or we're going somewhere, or we're going to meet other people, or we're going to go to an event. She, the woman, often built and produced the social capital for the family because that was one of the roles she was able to provide, not having to work a 9 to 5, not having to work in a transactional relationship. Right? As soon as you get back into the market, the workforce, your time and your energy, your relationships are transactional based on your paycheck. And that is not real reciprocity. And so the first one, as I've already said, women entering the workforce was a major catalyst to this process of the collapse of community and us sort of pulling ourselves out of our communal involvement. The next one is something that you'd probably guess, and that's a lack of rootedness. A lack of rootedness. Now, Robert Putnam actually said that he doesn't think this one actually was a major factor in everything. But if you were asked somebody, they would say, oh yeah, people are moving around way more than they used to. Well, in a way, people don't, as he highlighted, people in the 1950s and 60s actually moved more frequently than they move now. Difference is they actually owned homes. They actually had families. And so now, even though people aren't moving as much, so technically they would be more rooted locationally, geographically rooted in one place, because they're not investing in like more long-term situations, right? They would rather rent an apartment or something like that. They are less involved in the community itself. So So he highlighted that what's interesting is that actually people are moving less, generally speaking, than people moved in the 1950s and 60s. However, I would argue, based on what I saw, this is not what Dr. Robert Putnam said, I would say, yes, they're not moving as much, but their rootedness into a community, having children, maintaining a strong marriage, being involved. If you have a home, if you have kids, you're going to be way more involved. If you have a home, you're going to be interested in property tax. You're going to be interested who the mayor is. You're going to be interested in the school board, potentially. Obviously, people don't now. But if you're just renting, if you're more, again, more of aloof in regards to your situation in the community itself, in a way, you are less rooted. So changing living locations can hurt civil engagement, as he highlighted, but he showed, or he argued, that generally speaking, people actually moved more in the past than they're doing now. The next one, and the big one that I wanted to talk about, and what I think is probably the most, next to the most major factor, is technology. And as he said, technology, one of the pernicious things about technology is that it privatizes our leisure time. That historically, the ways that we experienced leisure time was with other people. It's not generally a historic process that when you want leisure time, you do that by yourself. Now, you could want to be alone or be in silence, or that's one thing, or go read. But if you're going to go listen to music, if you're going to go watch a movie, if you're going to see a television show, we used to do these more and more and more together. In fact, he even showed watching television. When television first came out, and it's a very pernicious factor in regards to the decline of social capital, but he showed that families actually watched shows together. When there was less programs, people would watch shows together. They would watch movies together. The whole family would come around the boob tube. But as he showed, as more screens entered in the home, more people began to watch, again, what they preferred, their own personal preference of content, of programming. And so they became more isolated. Now, if there's 3 TVs in the house, the kid goes somewhere else, and maybe even the parents, maybe they don't even watch the same thing. The woman's in the bedroom, she's watching her shows, the guy's downstairs watching football. And so even that causes more and more social isolation, even within the home, again, due to the perniciousness of privatizing our leisure time and our preferences. Privatizing our preferences. And so, again, think of the television continually doing that. And even television itself is going out of style, out of date. Why? Because the programming is too rigid, right? It's too mass oriented. Whereas things like Netflix and sort of subscription programming allows me to choose my preferences more. And so instead of even watching traditional television and traditional networks, I'd rather just get a Hulu package and a Netflix, and I'm good. Maybe I'll subscribe to the Disney Channel. Now I can watch all the movies I want, and I'm subscribed, and I can just choose my personal preferences. So even the movement in content creation, we see television being a major catalyst and detrimental effect to community involvement, but it's even going out of style now because it can't keep up with the demand for the privatization of personal preferences. And so chill, Netflix and chill, another perfect example of this process happening. Binge watching shows that we would used to do those things together, and now it's becoming more and more and more normalized to do all these and experience these things and have the emotions and hit the climax of whatever show you're watching by yourself. There's no relationship. There's no shared experience even with somebody else. Not even saying that that's a great thing, because as he highlights, entertainment itself, the privatization of entertainment has been a major negative force. He highlighted too that music, that he and another professor there at the Kennedy Center at Harvard, where he used to teach, they loved classical music. And so they would go to classical concerts, and that Putnam said he loves the older stuff, Beethoven, the Mozart, the older composers of classical music. Meanwhile, his friend, one of the other professors, he enjoyed all the contemporary stuff, the 20th century forms of classical music. And he said that they would regularly go to concert shows. And sometimes it was contemporary, sometimes it was the stuff he liked, the older stuff, but they would always go together. And that they would bring their wives. And so it was a 4-person thing, and they would do this regularly. But he highlighted that, again, as portable discs, CDs, compact discs became more prevalent in the 90s. Well, they both could just listen to the stuff. They could listen to Yo-Yo Ma or whatever on a CD, on their own Walkman. And they actually stopped going to the classical music concerts together because they could just listen in the private of their own home with a phenomenal sound system, the music that they preferred. So the technology doesn't lessen our personal preferences. The sound system at home, the CD, the opportunity to change the song that you want, it actually highlights and creates a sort of more optimal experience for your own personal preference. But what that does is it limits our capacity to engage with other people in situations where maybe we consume something together that's not totally my preference. And so that's a perfect example, again, how technology moves us in that private state. And so our private tastes are actually driving a wedge into our interconnectedness, right? Our private tastes are actually driving a wedge between us and other people. And that's the sort of, again, that reciprocity is, if I'm so concerned about my private taste, I'm not really concerned about engaging with somebody else. It's a subtle form of getting us into a more and more prideful worldview. So the next one is government policies. Obviously, certain government policies have aided in this dissolution and the undermining of community here in the United States. A perfect example would be welfare. So state supports people, not the community. One of the things that was true before welfare became so predominant here in the United States is that religious organizations, philanthropic organizations stepped up and took care of people who were really poor, who were homeless, who didn't have certain things. And so 1964 is when welfare, especially within the black population, really gets going, where, again, perniciously, they tell the black women that you'll get paid by Uncle Sam as long as you don't have a man in the home. And so, interestingly, we'll see the destruction of the nuclear family, women going into the workforce, the welfare system has been a major contributor to this sort of social isolation, the collapse of social capital. And so the state now supports the community, not the community. You see, the state is a sort of non-face. There is no person. You can't touch the state. The state is an abstraction of power. The state, the government is in a way an abstraction. It's a concept we have. The bureaucracy is really what it is. It's not a person. The president is just a sort of face head for the bureaucratic system itself. And so welfare perniciously is getting people to become dependent upon the abstraction of the government itself. Instead of a man in the home doing the 9 to 5 with the woman who stays home, or even the community building of religious organizations and philanthropic organizations providing that safety net for the poor and the hungry and whatnot. So even then, at least if it was, the local church or whatever it was people, it was faces, it was people in your community that you could send a thank you card to, that you could shake their hand, you could give them a hug, you can look them in the eyes. But you see, welfare itself, it ends, the community, all these organizations that provided these opportunities and reliefs in their communities, they have drastically dwindled because, again, Americans, generally speaking, aren't even participating in those safety nets for those communities and for those people. So government policies have certainly contributed to the decline of community building in America. And the next one, as I hinted at, is the decline of the nuclear family. Strong communities always have strong families. This is something that Robert Putnam found, whether it be in Italy, whether it be somewhere in Europe, whether it be in Africa, whether it be here in the United States. Strong communities always have strong families. And so look at the divorce rates here in the United States. It's atrocious. It's now, I think it's in the 60%. 60 percentile. I did a stream earlier on the ghettoization of America. This was many moons ago. But I remember in that stream, I found data that blew me away that for this year, 2022, the majority of babies born in the United States are going to be born to single mothers. So not even getting into divorce, the majority of the babies, it was like 57% or something, were going to be born to single mothers. They're not even going to have a dad. So the decline of the nuclear family is a major factor because now the woman doesn't even have the option, despite the government, again, the government policies de-incentivizing women being at home. That was another one of the policies. So not just the welfare, but sending the women into the workforce, which we already said, which really is a sort of government and social transition, that the women are going to have to go make money. They're going to have to go to work, and the men aren't even there to support them. Like, again, obviously we're existing in the 21st century. We're existing in a time where we are bombarded with all the problems that I've already spoke of, but I would imagine most of us Orthodox men are striving to be successful enough that we can have a stay-at-home mother so that we can make sure that the strongest thing in our lives, it may or may not be our business, it may or not be our ways in which we monetize and make money, but it definitely be our family. Finding a woman who will not get divorced, finding a woman who wants to have children, finding a woman who believes in your purpose as a man and is willing to submit to you and is willing to be there for the children, that can now, I mean, as Orthodox Christians, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find that situation and make that the strongest thing in our lives. You know, going to church, being part of the community, and then building our own family. So the decline of the nuclear family, he highlights as a major factor in the decline of social capital. And in fact, where you're going to find the least amount of nuclear families, you're going to find the highest rates of poverty and the highest rates of crime. And again, we can see that perfectly clear here in the United States. The next one was multiculturalism. This is another factor in regards to the collapse of social capital because multiculturalism and mass immigration, in a way, lack a shared identity. And this is where the critical race theory, I think, has been really pernicious. Technically, multicultural or people of different ethnicity or different ethnic communities are not detrimental in a definitional sense. If we take on a shared identity, a shared value system as whatever it meant to be an American, we could have a sort of level playing ground. But the way in which critical race theory advocates for everybody to be totally identified with your racial group or something, and then there's the Marxist tensions of power and opportunity and the subversion of other people. And so critical race theory within its Marxist lens only creates more conflict amongst groups. So it prevents a shared identity. We don't have a shared identity as Americans. Again, that was the whole melting pot thesis, and why America was so great is that many people would come here and they would take on that new identity as being American, whether you're German or Italian or whatnot. But again, the social fabric of the country itself was Christian. Whether the nation identified itself as Christian in the Declaration of Independence or not, that is less important than the fact that 99% of the people who made up this country would agree with Christian values, would identify themselves as Christian in some fashion or form. So multiculturalism lacks a sort of shared identity, but the more languages that are present that can't be spoken, that is a natural divide of community, which will break down social trust. Mass immigration is doing exactly that. That's why our federal government is intentionally, here in Indiana, they will send a whole community of Burmese people. They've taken over a whole, and again, God bless the Burmese. I have nothing against Burmese people, but the way that our government works is they will take people, immigrants for, again, not just Hispanics, but any immigrant community, and they'll put them in predominantly conservative areas, ironically. And so they'll have a language and a cultural distinction, and they'll create in-group preferences of this sort. And the people of those communities don't get a vote on them. It's not like the people of Indiana or Tennessee or wherever, they're sending Afghanis, illegal Hispanics, people from Central and South America. We don't get to decide about our communities. The federal government purposely inserts them in places, in my opinion, to create more tension, to create more division amongst people, to destroy, again, even the social capital that's even left in America. And so values, religion, the more immigration you have, the more distinctions across these things that you have, the more problems you have, the less social trust you have. Now, the number one, along with the technology that I think is contributing to this whole thing, is the decline of religion. Again, and this is one that Robert Putnam highlights substantially in this book, is that people going to church is one of the best indicators of their social involvement in the community itself. And so if they're going to church, they're way more likely to give money. They're way more likely to write letters. They're way more likely to send cards. They're way more likely to help somebody out without, again, expecting something in return. And so religion is the point. Church is the point of the most social capital. Why? Because of the things that I just said about multiculturalism. Shared identity. If you're going to church, we have a shared identity. We're Christians. In fact, we're not just Christians. We belong to the same denomination or the same church or the same parish. Shared identity, shared geography. If we're going to church together, we most likely have a shared language. Again, an orthodoxy can be a little bit different because obviously we have ethnic churches, but even in those ethnic churches, most people speak English. So religion then is another place where you find shared identity, shared language, shared geography, shared values, and a shared religion. So church is the place in which the problems that multiculturalism, mass immigration creates, church gives the exact opposite. So the decline in church is one, as he says, one of the biggest factors in indicating communities and places in which there's going to be a decline in social trust and there's going to be a decline in communal activity. It's a shared paradigm. It's not just shared identity and shared language and shared values and a shared religion. It's a shared lens in which we look at the world. Now, I know that even that can be very questionable because, again, even at my church, I know people who are Orthodox Christians that continually vote for abortion, transgenderism, homosexuality, LGBTQ stuff. I know at my church personally, I know a few people who are adamant, devoted Democrats, and they view themselves as above Trump supporters, said very derogatory things about Trump supporters, that if you vote that way, you must be in a trailer park, all this different stuff. These are Orthodox Christians. So we see how politics, in a way, has superseded the identity of people's religiosity. Shouldn't be the case, because if you're an Orthodox Christian, there's no way, however you feel about monetary policy or welfare systems, social nets. If you're an Orthodox Christian, you can't vote for all that stuff. But yet again, here in the 21st century, that's probably common in every parish. So the decline in religion is the decline in a shared paradigm. And that's really why people watching this stream or going to the Orthodox Church, one of the things that is so useful is that what you're doing is you're finding people with a shared paradigm, a shared perspective on the world. And this is a great utility for all of us. And this is really that community that we want and that we need. And I think that's also why many of you who have become Orthodox Christians, that have gone to a church, now belong to a parish, one of the things that is so interesting and appealing of that is because you now belong to a community, again, that you didn't choose, right? Just like the guy at the church who's still voting for abortion politics and LGBTQ issues and globalism and all that different stuff. You don't get to choose those people if you go to a church and you belong to a parish. And therefore, it forces you to not choose something based on your preference, right? Technology is isolating us because of the privatization of preferences themselves. So If you're going to a church and you're belonging to a church community, you don't get to choose those people, but you have to love those people. You have to deal with those people face to face, hands to hand, shaking hands, hugging, kissing babies, everything you do in fellowship, right? And so the decline in religion is not only the decline in the place that has the highest social capital, not only the decline in the place that is the greatest indicator of people's communal involvement in philanthropy, it's also a breakdown in paradigms itself, and it's a breakdown in belonging to a community that you don't get to choose. You see, the way that the internet's working now is you get to choose your community. Oh, you're a queer furry that likes to, fornicate with stuffed donkeys, stuffed animals. Oh, here's a community for you. And you get to then go online and get on your message board and create your little thumbnail and your identity and your fake username and your handle, and you get to talk to other people. Oh, well, they're all across the United States. I'm not alone. I'm in a community. No, you're in a mirror of your own self. You see, what's happening is people are choosing their own communities because the self-preference, because they really love themselves so much, they only want to belong in places in which they see themselves and other people. That is not Christian. That is not a true community building. That's definitely not reciprocity, because you can imagine on any of those forums with the transgenders or whatnot, if you were not to condone their various activities, they would be quite upset with you. So, it's a much larger, the fact that we belong to communities that we don't choose. Again, you can choose to be Orthodox, you can choose to be Christian, in a way you choose that much, but you don't get to choose who goes to your parish. And if you decide that you're going to belong to that community, you have to then utilize your compassion and your mercy and your love for those people. They actually have to be enacted in a real sense. If I belong to a community where everybody says the same thing and they validate my own narcissism and my own perceptions of myself, then I'm going to leave as soon as they don't fulfill that need anymore. And like I said, it's a self-referential mirror in which people are lost, literally worshiping themselves. The next factor, again, the two I think the most detrimental is technology and the decline of religion. The next one is globalism. So globalism, local shops replaced by large corporations. Think about, it's now holiday season, post-Thanksgiving. God bless you all. Hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. But now everybody's shopping. Today's Black Friday. They're going to get the best deals. And where they go to these large box corporations, right? Whether it be Walmart or Best Buy or whatever corporation that you're really into, or using Amazon, that people, again, are choosing their preferences, choosing gifts. Well, okay. But they're using mass global corporations instead of local mom and pop stores. And of course, 2020, what was the point of 2020? What was the point in getting everybody to shut their business down? To put them out of business. That small businesses, mom and pop stores, decimated due to 2020. And that was the purpose the whole time, because the Great Reset is the global homo reset. And so getting these mass corporations to become, oh yeah, you can go to Walmart. Yeah, you can go to Meijer, you just can't go to church. Aha. You see how 2020 perfectly embodies the opposite of everything that we're trying to show here. More social isolation, less communal involvement, shut down the churches, and get people to only consume what they're preferential for, and then they can go online and watch Hulu or watch whatever program they want. So local shops replaced by large corporations. People's focus on global issues, right? So people are less focused. When people were more involved in the community, as he talked about in the 1950s, people were more focused on the local issues, the local problems, solving the things that ail the local community. Those were more important than global issues, right? Global climate change. It's about the local things. It's about the local community. Well, what mass media has done is now people don't participate in the local community, And so because of the mass media, their minds have been switched on to only think about global issues, social justice issues, issues for humanity, equality, women, right? Things that may or may not affect the local community, but they're not situated psychologically towards looking at the local community, they're situated, they're primed mentally to look at everything as a global community, the global village, right? And this is a way in which to sort of prevent people from acting. If somebody knows Joe Schmo, they're on the sidewalk, they're in the local community, and he's in help, way more likely to go help him than, oh, the problem is poverty. And it's global poverty, and send us your $5 and we'll send it to the hungry orphan in Africa. Then you find out that they're money laundering, they're taking your money, they're doing all types of stuff with it. Not the same thing. Not the same thing as just getting a hot meal for Joe Schmo down on the street corner who's homeless. That is more beneficial. That is one-to-one. Priming people mentally through globalism to think at the global level, the communal level, right? They view that as more virtuous. I'm more virtuous than you because I think about humanity. I think about the collective. I think about the group. You're only consumed with your local community, with people who look like you. I'm concerned with justice. And so globalism primes people to think about global issues instead of local issues. And that also gets them, it changes their identity. Right? People are willingly become a global number, a global statistic, as opposed to Bob in the local community, John at the hardware store, right? People are now programmed to, oh no, I'm a global citizen, right? I'm going to get my health passport, as opposed to thinking about real people in real life situations in their local community. And then the last thing that I'm going to say here is the attitude change toward individualism, preference, and anti-authority. Obviously, anti-authority is a sort of prominent feature of being an American, the revolution, the sort of revolutionary spirit to some degree, and even being an individual, coming out of the Enlightenment and all that different stuff. But the attitude change from the 1960s moving forward is one in which people are actually preferring isolation. They're preferring their individualism. They're preferring their own preferences, and they view the pursuit of their own preferences as anti-authority. And isn't that so eye-opening, right? Think about the people who are doing the exact thing, right? All the NPCs, ironically, view themselves as anti-authority. How the heck did they pull that trick off? How did they pull the trick off that the people who think they're Democrats or therefore whatever issue, name an issue, they're pink pussy hats, whatever it is, they view themselves as rebels, as anti-authority, when the entire structure of the multinational Fortune 500 companies are in lockstep with their own positions and their own worldviews? It has nothing to do with being anti-authority. It's just it's a concept sold to people. And so this attitude and changes towards individualism, preference, and anti-authority, I think, gets people to become less and less involved. And also, when they're less involved, as I said, and he points out in his research, they become less tolerant of other people. And so you think about the radical left and the people who have bought hook, line, and sinker, all the things that I've said, again, everything that the Matrix wants them to believe. And yes, indeed, they are the least tolerant people in the United States. They want you dead. Again, it's so funny seeing Whitmer and the mayor of Chicago, Pritzker, all these people. Now they're being confronted on the facts that they shut down schools, they shut down small businesses, they did all this stuff. It doesn't matter because the elections are fake, but they get reelected, and then they act like that never happened. They're what? I didn't shut down schools. I would never shut down schools. No, lady, you shut down. What are you talking about? You did it for almost 2 years. What are you talking about? And no, that wasn't me. That wasn't me. That the people who have purchased all these lies, they believe in all these lies, they literally have been programmed to become the least tolerant people. And that is totally consistent with people who are less and less engaged. And so the NPC, they are buying into the propaganda They're buying into the narrative of the Matrix. They are already being less and less involved into the local community, into real life communities. Instead, their eyes are focused on these online digital communities of which is their personal preference and people who reflect themselves in each other. And yeah, and yeah, that attitude change is really, really insightful, I think, in regards to how uninvolved they are and how intolerant they are about your life and about your well-being. So, with that being said, I want to get into this book for the amount of time that we have left. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. Not gonna have enough time to go through all of it now. I was not expecting to ramble as long as I did, but you know how I am, and so I did in fact ramble this long. So here's the first one: political organizations with regular paid staff. Right here. So we see political organizations since 1975 with paid staff have dramatically increased. Whereas citizen participation and campaign activity since 1952 have decreased. So ironically, more money in politics than ever before, and yet less communal involvement. How does that work? Let me see, find some more here. Trends in civil engagement. This top one is people who will always attend a political rally, right? Down. People who sometimes might join a political rally, down. The people who never join a political rally basically stays the same or slightly increase. And one of the things that I think is so interesting, then you look at like January 6th, our government will go after the people who actually want real community, the people who actually will organize and meet in person January 6th, 2020 or 2021, protesting the fake election. What is it? The FBI and the intelligence apparatus of the United States goes and arrests those Americans. So we see our government is actively persecuting the people who try to resist this stuff. Right? What wasn't it an NPR article that talked about how dangerous Russian orthodoxy is in the United States and how racist and homophobic they are? Why? They uphold the Bible and they belong to the Russian Orthodox Church. They're soldiers of Putin. Give me a break. But we can see how the apparatus, the matrix that exists right now, they want to arrest and shut down anybody who creates real community, meaning in real life, in person, one-to-one, face-to-face. You can expect an FBI agent to be there to make sure the whole thing is subverted. So, okay, moving on. Let's see. Next one, trends in political community participation. It looks like served as an officer or some club organization. This is from 1973 to 1994, down 42%. Worked for a political party, down 42%. Served on a committee with some local organization, down 39%. Attended a public meeting on the town or school affairs, down 35%. Attended a political rally or a speech, down 34%. And so, despite whatever you think about Trump, his MAGA rallies, in a way, were a response to this general trend. And in fact, there was a leftist, I forget who it was. Here, let me see if I have this pulled up. Okay. Here we go. Bowling Alone. Here it is. Thomas E. Mann. So Putnam was documented as a factor. So in their book in 2017, One Nation After Trump. Oh, here we go. Some leftist scholars going to tell you what's going on. Well, in some degree, I agree with them that the civic and social capital, the civic groups of America, one of the reasons why Trump, it says, many rallied, behind him out of a yearning for forms of community and solidarity that they since have been lost. Well, indeed, they have been lost. And in a way, the MAGA rallies did provide that opportunity for people. So I kind of agree with them there. So 34% stopped attending. Again, these numbers were only worse as we moved into the 21st century. Let's go to the next chapter here and see what we got. Here is the rise and fall of the PTA, the Parent-Teacher Conferences or Association. So we can see, if you're looking at this graph here, you can see it begins in 1910. It's going up and up and up. Right there, we have the Great Depression, right? And then a radical increase in PTA affiliation. Goes up to its peak at 1959. And as soon as we got into the 1960s, it's been on a dramatic decline until we see in the 1990s, it went up and then it started to go back down again. And it's only gone down since then. Obviously, since then, now they're giving your kids hormones. They're transitioning them at school. They got dresses for your sons to wear so everybody can call them Susie. It's unreal. So right there, we can see the trends in PTA, the rise and fall of the PTA from 1910 to 1997. And so, yeah. Anyways, we'll move on. I have paragraphs here I was going to read. We just don't have a whole lot of time. So moving on. Religious participation. This was a really interesting section. So let me read this to you guys. Again, here's trends in church attendance. This is a trend in church attendance in the United States. Anyways, there's a section here I want to read to you guys real quick. So, churches provide an important incubator for civic skills, civic norms, community interest, and civic recruitment. Religiously active men and women learn to give speeches, run meetings, manage disagreements, and bear administrative responsibility. They also befriend others who are, in turn, likely to recruit them in other forms of community activity. In part, these reasons, churchgoers are substantially more likely to be involved in secular organizations, to vote, and participate politically in other ways, and to have deeper informal social connections. Regular worshipers and people who say that religion is very important to them are much more likely than other people to visit friends, to entertain at their home, to attend club meetings, to belong to sports groups, professional and academic societies, school service groups, youth groups, service clubs, hobbies and garden clubs, literary, art, discussions and study groups, school fraternities and sororities, farm organizations, political clubs, nationality groups, and other miscellaneous groups. And that was another fascinating thing. I don't know if I have the graph for that one. Maybe we'll come across it. Is he showed in conjunction with the decline in social community and social capital, we actually don't even host our friends as much. I know I stopped it in here. I'm not sure if we'll find it, but there was a graph in which he showed the amount of people. So this was like in the 1950s. Do you host a friend at your house? And it was like 70-some%, almost 80% would have a friend over almost weekly for dinner, to watch television, radio program, to hang out with the family. And that a massive decline. It went down to like 27% in the 90s of people who would have a friend over weekly to engage at their home or serve dinner. To now, it was like 32% or so, somewhere around the low 30s of people that would have a friend over twice a month. So we don't even spend time with the people we like as much as we used to. Anyways, moving on here. Religiosity rivals education as a powerful correlate for the most forms of civic engagement. In fact, religiously involved people seem simply to know more people. One intriguing survey that asked people to enumerate all individuals with whom they had a face-to-face conversation in the course of the day found that religious attendance was the most powerful predictor of the number of one's daily personal encounters. Regular church attendees reported talking with 40% more people in the course of the day. These studies cannot show conclusively that church-going itself, quote, produces social connectivity, probably the causal arrow between the 2 points in both directions, but it is clear that religious people are unusually active social capitalists. Religious involvement is an especially strong predictor of volunteering and philanthropy. About 75 to 80% of church members give to charity, as compared with 55 to 60% of non-church members, and 50 to 60% of church members volunteer their time, while only 30 to 35% of non-church members. In part, of course, this is because churches themselves do things that require funds and volunteers, but religious adherents are also more likely to contribute their own time and their own money to activities beyond their own congregation. Even excluding contributions to religious causes, active involvement in religious organizations is among the strongest predictors for both philanthropy and volunteering. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next section here, just moving through again. This book here. Guys, smash that like for everybody who's still with us. Here's the next section on, let's see here, on connections in the workplace. This one's really interesting. Again, here you see union memberships. Why is union memberships interesting? Because one of the criticisms of some of his work is that many of the clubs and organizations, they claim, oh, those are middle-class organizations. Those are people who have economic opportunities. However, historically, labor unions were the place where people who were quote-unquote working class, who had less money and less social connections, had high involvement and met a lot of people and were socially involved in their community. So labor unions were historically a great predictor of working people's involvement. So you can see here, union memberships in the United States from 1900 to 1998. It peaks right here in 1950. So this line here is 1950. And then basically by the time you get to the early 1970s, it is in a drastic decline. Now, obviously, labor unions aren't as active or powerful as they used to be, but that's because people don't belong to labor unions the way they used to be and demand labor unions do the work that they ask for. So here's a little section I'm going to read to you in regards on working. Work-related organizations, both unions and businesses and professional organizations, have traditionally been among the most common forms of civic connectedness in America. In our inventory of social capital, this is an important ledger. Figure 14, which I just showed you guys, summarizes trends in the rate of union membership in the United States over the course of the 20th century. The details of this historical profile are linked to the specific history of American labor. Moving forward, for many years, labor unions provided one of the most common organizational affiliations among American working men, and to some extent that remained true in recent decades. However, the rate of union membership has been falling for more than 4 decades, with the steepest decline occurring since 1975. Since the mid-1950s, America has nosedived from 32.5% to 14.1%. By now, virtually all of the explosive growth in union membership that was associated with the New Deal has been erased. Moreover, the type of involvement in unions has slackened. Unions are now seen mostly as hired bargaining agents, not as a social movement. Although unions, like other voluntary associations, have often been plagued by oligarchy, apathy, and corruption, historically, they both created and depended upon social capital, that is, networks of reciprocity. By the end of the 20th century, however, this once central element in the social life of working Americans has virtually vanished. The solidarity of union halls is now mostly a fading memory of aging old men. Okay. Moving to some more data here. Here's some informal socializing. So informal social connections. This was really good. Okay. So informal social connections. This is again visiting with friends. Let's see here. Yeah, here's one on visiting with friends. This one's from beginning at 1975. They have recorded on the average time entertained at home in the last year. Drastically declined. Social visiting declines. Having friends in for an evening at least twice a month has dropped. Looks like about 15% from 1977 to 1997. So basically in a 20-year period. Went to a home of a friend's during the past week. That dropped almost 20%. So only about 20% of the people surveyed had went to a friend's home during the past week. So let me read you again the section here that I wanted to on visiting with friends and acquaintances has long been one of the most important social practices in American history. The early 19th century in New England, the historian Karen V. Hansen has shown was, quote, a very social time. The many types of visiting range from pure socializing to communal labor. Visitors took afternoon tea, made informal Sunday visits, attended maple sugar parties and cider tastings. They stayed for extended visits, offered assistance in giving birth. They paid the respects to the family of the deceased. They participated in quilting parties. They raised houses and barns. Visits lasted from a brief stayover or a call to a leisurely afternoon to a long month stay. Visitors frequently stayed overnight with their friends. The difficulty of travel, particularly in winter, by foot, horse, stage, wagon, and train, created barriers to visiting, but did not deter visitors who highly valued their contact with the neighbors and kin. It was through visiting, in fact, that they created and formed their communities. And so, family dinners, this is a good one. Look at this. So this graph is family dinner, right here, family dinners. Okay, how many times and how important is it that you go that you have a family dinner? So the question was, our whole family usually eats dinner together, and then the answers are generally or moderately agree, definitely agree, or disagree. The bottom line here is disagree. So we try to have dinner as a family. We see the people who say, no, we don't try to have dinner as a family. That has increased. The people who say we definitely try to have family or have dinner as a family, that's this top line here, the one that has gone down, down, down. This one right here. So the people who say we definitely agree that the family, we want to have dinner together, has drastically declined. Where the people who moderately, oh yeah, we generally try to, that has increased. So the people who definitely try have decreased. The people who say we moderately try has increased, and the people who say we definitely do not try has also increased. And so that was another thing that he showed, is that how important is it for your family to eat together? That was one of these communal activities that has basically been forgotten in the United States, is that we share communal meals. We go out with friends. We go to dinners and restaurants. It's not just for self-pleasure. It's a communal activity in which we gauge with other people. And so people, and that's where it showed fast food. So before fast food was prominent in America, people went to diners and restaurants all the time. It's not like they went out less. They went out just as much, but they were at sit-down places where they were with friends, they were with family, they were with people they cared about. Now with fast food, as you saw, like in moving into the 1990s, fast food becomes a significant portion of where people go out. They go out and get fast food. Here's an interesting stat. This is the rise in card games from 1900 to 1950. So right here is 1950, and we see that card games were very, very popular in the U.S., and those leisure activities have dramatically declined. So again, you see that sort of that crux right there. Now I'm going to move it over here. These are the amount of people who, so that top line is the people who play cards. So that was that little dip that we saw on the previous page. And now from 1950 to 1997, dramatic decline in the amount of people who played cards in America. Playing cards was a significant communal and social activity amongst Americans in this country. So we see that has dramatically changed. Played home video games, increased. Visited casinos, increased. Attended movies, moderately stays the same. Basically from 1975 to 1999, about the same. But playing cards, a non-electrical entertainment, not looking at a screen, unlike screen casinos, video games, and movies, dramatically declined. Okay. Here's one on bowling that I wanted to share with you. I'm going to read this section on bowling. So stagnation and fitness. Ironically, people want to talk about health and fitness. Ironically, according to his survey, these are the people that engage in like fitness and health. So who took it seriously? The answers are attended exercise classes, attended a health club, or went jogging. This begins at 1975 and ends at 1997. This one right here, the only physical activity that went up during this period was walking. Leisurely walking increased during this period. So let me read something here. Virtually alone among major sports, only bowling has come close to holding its own in recent years. Bowling is the most popular competitive sport in America. Bowlers outnumber joggers, golfers, or softball players more than 2-1, soccer players, including kids, by a number of 3-1, and tennis players and skiers by a number of 4-1. Despite bowlers' retro image, in 1996, even 20-somethings went bowling about 40% more often than they went inline skating. More recently, even greater numbers of young people have reportedly been attracted by a high-tech combination called cosmic bowling, which I'm sure you guys have gone to. Moreover, participation in all major sports is highly concentrated among either young men or the upper middle class, or both. Unlike health clubs, bicycling, jogging, exercise, swimming, tennis, golf, softball, and other major sports, bowling is solidly middle American, common among both men and women, couples and singles, working class and middle classes, young and old. Given population growth, more Americans are bowling than ever before. But bowling league bowling has plummeted in the last 10 to 15 years. Between 1980 and 1993, the total number of bowlers in America increased by 10%, while league bowling decreased more than 40%. See figure 26. That's this figure right here. So that is, right here. So this is the bowling leagues. So we see men and women, the rise and decline of bowling leagues. The top line is the men, the bottom line is the women. You can see both men and women dramatically participated more frequently in bowling leagues. That's all the way up to the high peak there looks like 1963. So that peak right there looks like 1963. And then these peaks right here, that is a 1980. So since 1980 to 1997, that's that sharp drop in bowling league activity. People aren't participating in bowling leagues. Okay, so let's read more. Figure 26 shows the long-run trend in league bowling in America, a profile that precisely matches the trends in other forms of social capital that we have already examined. Steady growth from the beginning of the century, except during the Depression of World War II, explosive growth between 1945 and 65, stagnation until the late 1970s, and then a precipitous plunge over the last 2 decades of the century. At the peak of the mid-1960s, 8% of all American men and nearly 5% of all American women were members of bowling teams. Yet, as the projections in Figure 26 indicate, if the steady decline in bowling league bowling were to continue at the pace of the last 15 years, league bowling would vanish entirely within the first decade of the 21st century. Lest bowling be thought of a wholly trivial example, I should note that according to the American Bowling Congress, 91 million Americans bowled at one point during 1996, over 25% more than voted in the 1998 congressional election. Even after the 1980s plunge in league bowling, between 2 and 3% of American adults regularly bowled in leagues. Although, as we have seen, that figure was dropping fast, the decline in league bowling threatens the livelihood of bowling lane proprietors because, according to the owner of one of the nation's largest bowling lane chains, league bowlers consume 3 times as much as beer and pizza as do solo bowlers, and the money in bowling is in the beer and pizza, not the balls and shoes. The occasionally civic conversations over beer and pizza that solo bowlers forego. The broader social significance, however, lies in the social interaction and even occasionally civic conversations over beer and pizza that the solo bowlers forego. Whether or not bowling beats balloting in the eyes of most Americans, bowling teams illustrate yet another vanishing form of American social capital. Okay. Looking at the next one, what we got here? Volunteering fostered by club going and church going. Let's see. So this is an interesting graph right here. So the question, the way that it's divided up, it's asking, how often do you attend church? Monthly or more, less than monthly, or never? And then that's what deviates the left or right, and then the height of them is the mean times of volunteering per year. So the people who went to church the most, right here, volunteered way more than everybody else. So again, the people who volunteered the most dramatically went to church more often. So okay, you already know that. I already kind of laid that out. Okay, going to the next one. Let's see what we got here. Reciprocity, honesty, and trust. And I have a quote from David Hume that I want to give you guys. Guys, please smash that like for everybody who's still here if you have not. And I'm about to get into the super chat. So getting ready to finish this up real quick, and then we're going to dive straight into the super chats. But I want to share this quote from David Hume. Again, the famous English atheist, right? Empiricist. Your corn is ripe today. Mine will be so tomorrow. 'Tis profitable for us both that I should labor with you today, and that you should aid me tomorrow. I have no kindness for you, and know you have a little for me. I will not therefore take any pains upon your account, and should I labor with you upon my account in expectation of a return, I know I should be disappointed, and that I should in vain depend upon your gratitude. Here then I leave you to labor alone. You treat me in the same manner. The seasons change, and both of us lose our harvest for want of mutual confidence and security. And so he points that, so it's a kind of convoluted, older English, but what he's trying to say is, the corn is ripe today, mine will be so tomorrow. That the reciprocity of me helping my neighbor when his is ready, that he'll probably help me when mine is ready, and we'll both be better for it. Meanwhile, where they get to the point where you have no gratitude for your neighbor, you don't help him get his, he doesn't help you get yours, and neither one of you get as much. And so that demonstration of the reciprocity of the trust underlying our social organization and social capital highlights, again, the collapse in our own society. So that's what this next section was about. Most Americans today believe we live in a less trustworthy society than our parents did. In 1952, a figure 37 shows Americans were split about 50-50 on the issue of whether our society was then upright morally as it had been in the past. In 1998, however, after nearly 4 decades of growing cynicism, we believe by a margin of 3-1 that our society is less honest and it's less moral than it used to be. But perhaps that only proves that nostalgia is in fashion. Survey archives, however, allow us to screen out, quote unquote, the golden glow, right? Preferencing like, oh, the 1950s were so much better, at least to some extent. By comparing our feelings today, not with how we imagine an early generation might have felt, but rather what that generation at that time actually said in response to an identical question, the best evidence suggests that the social trust rose from the mid-40s to the mid-1960s, peaking. Social trust in America peaked in 1964, the same year that welfare was introduced, the same year that the countercultural revolution began, right? Very interesting stuff. Just as other measures of social capital did, middle-aged Americans in the 1960s were probably living in a more trusting society than the one in which we have grown up in. Okay, another, let's see, what we got next? This is really fascinating. This graph right here, what is it showing? Is how societal trust, right? High trust societies and how they obey traffic laws. So this is a graph. This is a statistical data from, well, I can read it out. It's from the Foundation of Traffic Safety, and they have been documenting aggressive driving from for a very long time. And what this looks at is the changing observance of stop signs. How many people will actually drive through a stop sign and not stop? Well, right here, back in 1978, we can see the amount of people who did no stop, who did a rolling stop, or did a full stop were relatively about the same, okay? And the people who did a full stop were actually the highest. So the people who did a full stop, they're the highest there. See, they're relatively about the same. The people that did no stop at all were much lower. Well, since 1978, as social trust has disintegrated, the amount of people who won't stop at a stop sign has absolutely skyrocketed. Meanwhile, the people who will do a California roll or will do a full stop has also dropped. Right? These two lines are people who do a sort of a California roll or will come to a full stop at a stop sign. That has been on the precipitous decline. People who won't stop at all, it's a massive incline. And what he's doing is he's trying to show and relate this to social trust in a society, that social trust isn't just me trusting my neighbor. It's me trusting the people on the road. It's me obeying traffic laws. It's the subconscious ways in which we move through our society. So, very interesting stuff there. So anyways, I think that's most of this stuff I've already kind of hit, and I'm just reiterating. So if you guys would like to learn more and see some of these graphs of everything I'm talking about, get this book, Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community by Robert Putnam. This is a best-selling book. Again, timeless book. Major thank you to Jeremy Hosey for, again, sponsoring tonight's stream and getting me to read this book. At first, I was really reluctant. It was so thick. I had so much to do. I was like, oh my gosh, I got to dive into this. But the more I read, the more I learned, the more I understood what this book was doing, the more I understood why Jeremy wanted me to do a stream on this and why it's useful and why this whole book is only more true in the 21st century. This is only more true now than it ever was before. And so if this is a topic that you'd like to learn more about, I do recommend this book. With that being said, guys, I'm going to now conclude this stream and get into the super chats. Please hit that like button. Would greatly appreciate that for everybody who's still watching. And if you would like to support, please send a super chat using the Streamlabs link. Or if you prefer YouTube, you can use YouTube. But now I'm going to dive into some of these super chats. Okay. So thank you all for being here so much. And again, a major thank you to Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring tonight's stream. First super chat comes from Hides in Mud. Throws in $4.99 and says, how much for a dedicated stream again? And it is $250. So if you want to sponsor a stream, you can do so with this link right here. And it is $250 because you are purchasing my time and my hours. So I've heard some people, oh man, that's expensive. Bro, you know, I'm going to spend a whole day and multiple days. Like, look what I just did for this guy, Jeremy Hosey, for his book. It's been multiple days doing research on your specific topic. Now, if you would like for me to do a stream on a topic that you've selected, all you have to do is go to the link I posted there in the live chat, and you can purchase a sponsored stream, and then I will email you, and then you can lay out to me what it is, the type of stream or topic that you want me to do. Now, you cannot force me to make arguments for whatever you want, but you can provide a topic for me to dive into, and then I will construct my own argument of where I want to go. Often, again, if you're watching this channel, we're probably going to have the same opinions, but just for some people who've already asked, you cannot tell me what I need to argue for or my opinion should be. You can give me a topic, and I'll dive into it deeply and do the research, and you can... I can present the way that I want to present it. So that's what we do. If that is something you'd be interested in, Hides in Mud, feel free to sign up. I'd be happy to dive into whatever topic you'd be interested in. So thank you so much, Hides in Mud, for the $4.99 super chat. Next one comes from Greg. Greg throws in $4.99, no comment. Well, thank you so much, Greg, for the $4.99 super chat. God bless you. And God bless you, Hides in Mud. Hope you both, I don't know if you're both American, but happy Thanksgiving if you are. And then, so thank you so much, Greg, for the $4.99 super chat. Next one comes from Amptown1. Amptown1 throws in $5 and says, enjoyed your horrific stream very much. Well, thank you so much, Amptown1, for the $5 super chat. I'm glad you enjoyed the horrific stream. Shout out to Rachel Wilson. She is a great friend. Love the Wilsons. Shout out to Andrew and Rachel Wilson. I'll actually be over on the Crucible tomorrow night debating a Protestant pastor on Sola Scriptura. So that should be quite interesting. But I'll be diving into that tomorrow night over on the Crucible Saturday night. So if you guys are available, I'll see you all then. So Amptown1 throws in the $5, said, enjoyed the horrific stream very much. Well, thank you. God bless you, brother, Amptown1. I really appreciate the $5 super chat, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Next super chat comes from Big Balla, throws in $5 and no comment. So thank you so much, Big Balla, for the $5 super chat. No comment. I really appreciate it. God bless you and yours. Next super chat comes from the Keenan Beats. Shout out to Keenan Beats. God bless you, bro. Again, everybody give Keenan a shout out for the great music. Our today's intro music was Keenan Beats. And, Amptown. Oh, no, I'm a girl. Okay, Amptown1 is a girl. I apologize, Amptown1. So Amptown1 is a female, and she enjoyed the horrific stream very much. Well, God bless you, my sister. Hope you are doing well. I apologize for the gender confusion. So thank you so much, Amptown1, for the $5 super chat. Shout out to Big Balla for the super chat. And next one is Keenan Beats, throws in $10 and says, I couldn't imagine not having my church community. I am beyond blessed to have them. And exactly, and that's a real community. That is a real community of people that you did not choose each person, and each person doesn't have the same worldview or same perspective on everything that you might have, although generally we should. As Orthodox, we should have a shared paradigm, but it forces you to actually practice love and actually practice compassion and mercy, unlike belonging to a self-referential community of what basically you know, everybody looks like yourself because you all wear cat ears and you identify as furries. So shout out to Keenan Beats. Again, he says, I couldn't imagine not having my church community. I'm beyond blessed to have them. And everybody give Keenan a shout out for, he got recently baptized into the church. And so glory to God, to Keenan. God bless you, brother. Again, glory to God. I've been talking to you for a while on your own ortho, first Christian journey and then an ortho journey. So really love to hear that you've been brought in fully. Keenan is a baptized Orthodox Christian now. He is on the team. So welcome home, Keenan. God bless you, brother. Really, really appreciate all your support. Next super chat comes from Nefer, throws in $7.99 and says, great topic. Well, thank you so much, Nefer, for the $7.99. Really appreciate that. And Thank you. Shout out to, again, Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring today's stream and getting me to read this thick old book, Bowling Alone. So because of this book, I came up, presented today's topic. So God bless you all. Next super chat comes from Amptown1 again. Well, God bless you, sister. And she says, I really enjoyed the horrific stream. Best book for super new interest in orthodoxy. Ooh, best. Okay. Amptown1, you're going to have to tell me what type of book you're looking for. Because one of the things with Orthodox books is there can be a wide range of what it is you are getting, right? So I'm going to lay out what I'm talking about, but I'm not recommending any one of these unless they resonate with you. For example, I had studied a little bit of philosophy. So for me, the Cosmic Mystery of Jesus Christ by St. Maximus the Confessor, that was one of my first Orthodox books, and it was incredibly influential for my movement into Orthodoxy. If you're looking for a catechetical text, a book that's going to lay out a full overview of what Orthodoxy is, what the Orthodox Church is, what exactly we believe, why we're different from Western Christianity, I would recommend this book, Byzantine Theology, Historical Trends and Doctrinal Themes. This is, I believe, one of the best, most encompassing books on orthodoxy for people who don't know the history, the theology, some of the intricacies of everything. So if you're not familiar with anything Orthodox, I would recommend the Byzantine Theology book. If you're, a deep thinker and you know philosophy and some of the words and categories, some of the church father stuff would be really good. If you're more of a popular reader and you really don't have some of that stuff and you just want to get something more emotionally involved, I would recommend this one. The Gurus, the Young Man, and Elder Paisios. This one, you're going to get a flavor of what orthodoxy is without being bombarded with church history and doctrines and dogmas. And you're also not going to have a knowledge of a bunch of philosophical categories. So that can also be another option, but yeah. You said catechetical. Yeah. If you're regarding like what orthodoxy is, I would say this book is the most comprehensive overview. Byzantine Theology, Historical Trends and Doctrinal Themes. So I hope that's useful. Amptown1, again, I don't know where you're going or what your personal preference is, but that would be my recommendation. Those are all three books that I really like. So that would be kind of my go-to. If you're wanting maybe somebody from the church, dive into maybe some Seraphim Rose. Maybe Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, Nihilism. Those are some good ones too that I know a lot of people have read and have good segues, good doorways into Orthodoxy and leading into other texts. So that could be something as well. So that's up to you. Not sure what your preference is or where you're at. But thank you so much, Amptown1, for the $3 super chat and the $5 super chat. God bless you and thank you very, very much. Next super chat comes from Keenan Beats again. Keenan throws in another super chat. Shout out to Keenan. God bless you, bro. Keenan throws in another super chat of $5 and says, DPH, what's your favorite and least favorite Thanksgiving dish? I want the honest truth. Okay, I can do that one. Number one favorite Thanksgiving dish is my mother's sweet potato casserole. It's got pecans. It's got brown sugar. It tastes phenomenal. You can eat it hot. You can eat it cold. It's got complex carbohydrates, and yet it's super sweet and delicious. So my favorite, just single dish, is definitely my mother's sweet potato casserole. My least favorite Thanksgiving dish. Least favorite. Now you're getting me in hot water here, Keenan, because my mom watches some of my streams, and so I would never say anything you make is not tasty. So it's obviously nothing that my mom makes, but if I had to choose what I don't usually get, I'm not a big stuffing person. So I don't usually do the stuffing. I know that's a pretty traditional Thanksgiving cuisine. I've had stuffing that I do in fact like. I have had stuffing that I do like. Generally speaking, when it comes to Thanksgiving dinner and filling up your plate, I'll go heavy on the ham and turkey. I like the dark meat over the light meat, just my personal preference. The white meat turkey, a little bit too dry. However, what we do, my brother-in-law deep fries 2 turkeys. So our deep fried turkey is absolutely delicious. It's more moist, and the skin is, oh my gosh. He seasons it, and then he deep fries the turkey, 2 of them. He pulls it out with the carver and hands me a leg or a wing. It's delicious. So our turkey's pretty good, although I do prefer dark meat over white meat. And I always good with the honey glazed ham or a brown sugar ham. So definitely like that. I like pumpkin pie. We had a coconut pie. We had a cherry pie, an apple pie. So I went heavy with the sweets. I went heavy with the sweet potatoes, heavy with the meat. My mom makes great green beans with the bacon in it and the bacon grease. Oh my gosh, it's so good. So I would say I'm pretty much down for the count for most things. Generally speaking, I'm not a big stuffing person. That's just me. Although again, I've had stuffing that was good, but on average, I'm not a stuffing person. So that would probably have to be it, Keenan. Favorite, sweet potato casserole. My mom's green beans. Anything my mom makes is phenomenal. Yeah, we had, let's see, a lot of stuff. Mashed potatoes. Oh my gosh, with tons of butter in them. Oof. I love mashed potatoes. Love green beans. So yeah, that's basically what I had yesterday. And then everything else was a bunch of sweets, red wine, and coffee. That was basically my Thanksgiving day. So I hope that takes care of it, Keenan. Oh, he says, okay, fair choice. Okay, yeah. What's yours? Leave a comment down there. What's yours? Yes, I like dressing. I like gravy. So I like gravy. I know people typically do the gravy with the dry white meat with turkey. But again, my brother-in-law, he deep fries it. And so it's phenomenal. Yeah, Keenan, let me know favorite, least favorite. That was the full honest truth. And I avoided getting in trouble with my mother. So that worked out well. But Keenan, thank you so much, brother, for the super chats. For $15 tonight, thank you very, very much, bro, for the support. And it looks like the last and final super chat comes from David Franco Jr. Shout out to David Franco Jr. God bless you, bro. And he says for $9.99, he says, hey, bro, for some reason I can't log in through YouTube on the Streamlabs page. Not sure what's going on. Hope you're well and had a good Thanksgiving. God bless. Yeah. Well, multiple people have sent things in through Streamlabs, so I'm not entirely sure, Mr. Franco Jr., what is going on, and obviously I can't check that right now. But I'm not sure what's going on with the Streamlabs page. I know other people have been able to send super chats through Streamlabs, so all good. I understand. But thank you so much, bro, for the $9.99 super chat. I really appreciate that. And major thank you again to everybody who super chat. Major thank you to Keenan Beats. God bless you, bro. Really appreciate it. God bless David Franco Jr. Thank you, Amptown1, 2 super chats. Thank you very much, Amptown1, for your support. Thank you very much, Nefer. Thank you very much, Big Balla. And thank you very much, Greg and Hides in Mud. That basically concludes the super chats, and that concludes tonight's stream. Again, major thank you to Jeremy Hosey for sponsoring tonight's stream. Thank you, bro, for getting me to read this book. I'll admit I was reluctant at first when I saw this book, and then I purchased it, and then I saw how thick this thing was. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to dive into this. But then as I dove into it, I wanted to read more and more and more. And it's like, I couldn't just do a chapter. I got to do an analysis of the whole damn thing. And so that's what we did tonight. And I hope that if anybody is interested in what we discussed tonight, please get the book. It's not that expensive. It's a good read. It's very straightforward. Tons of graph, tons of statistical data, great sociological, social science, academic text. And if you'd like to, again, learn more about the collapse and revival of American community, get this book by Dr. Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. This is a bestseller, again, from the end of the 1990s. With that being said, guys, I'm going to hop off here. God bless you all. Please hit that like. And I will be back most likely Sunday. So I will see you all Sunday night or Monday night. But until then, as always, God bless.